Now that we have successfully installed a fresh copy of Legato Framework and we now also know how to run the project, it is now time for us to take a look at the directory structure. So I'll open the project in my favorite text editor, and right here you can see all of the folders and files that are available when we create a fresh copy of the Legato Framework. Let's start from the very top. We have the app folder. This is the folder that contains the core of your application. That means when you are building any web application, this is going to be the core folder that will contain your major files. It has here a folder called commands, a folder called controllers, a folder called middleware, and a folder called models. The command folder is where you are going to store your console commands, assuming that you are going to be creating some console command for your applications. You are going to store them inside of this command folder. Or alternatively, if you are using the Legato command line tool to create a command, it will be placed inside of this folder by default. We're going to talk more about this later. And then inside of here, we have two files. One is example.php and the second one is register.php. So when we create a new command, we need to register it inside of this file so that the framework will know that we have created a command, and then it will make it available to us as part of the list of commands that are available in the framework. Next is the controller folder. So this is where we are going to be storing all of our controllers. We have two files here. We have base controller and we have index controller. The base controller is the main controller that all of your controllers should extend, and as you can see here, it also extends another controller, which is the main Legato Framework base controller. So if we go inside of this file, you can see here that this class is being instantiated with the request object, which is the HTTP request that is being sent to your application and then makes it available to all of the controllers that extends it. So every controller that extends the base controller automatically have access to the request object, which is already injected into the constructor of the base controller. So right here, if we open index controller, you can see that it extends the base controller. Therefore, it can now have access to the request object to use inside of the controller. And then next we have the middleware folder. So this is where you are going to register all of your middleware that you create for your application. Right now, there's a middleware here called CSRF verification. We're going to talk more about this later in the course. But for right now, know that when you create a middleware, you need to store them inside of the middleware folder. And then next we have the model folder. So this is where all your models are going to be stored. Models are basically objects or classes that represent a table inside of your database. So this is the user model, which comes by default when you install the framework. This will represent a table in your database called users. So we're going to talk more about this later. Next, we have the cache folder, and by default inside of the cache folder, we have a blade folder. So all of the compiled blade files are going to be stored inside of this folder blade if you are using the blade templating engine. Remember that the framework supports two major templating engine, Blade and Twig, and the default is set to Twig. So if you change it to Blade, then all of the generated files are going to be stored inside of this folder. And then next we have config. Inside of the config folder, right now we just have one file which is called twig.php. This file allows you to define Twig global variables. So if you want some variables to be available globally when you are using the Twig templating engine, then you can define them inside of here and then set values for them. And now we have come to the public folder, which is the main entry point for the application that you build using the Legato framework. So inside of this public folder, we have CSS, we have JS, and then we have .htcss, and then we have index.php. If you install a fresh copy using Legato 1.1.0, you won't have this JS folder. I just created this JS folder. Right now you only have the CSS folder, which is here. So you can just right click and create the folder that you need inside of here. So basically we store our CSS inside of CSS and then store our JavaScript inside of the JS folder. And then the index.php basically just contains one line of code. It requires a file which is called bootstrap.php. This is the file that actually sets up the application, and you can actually see the PHP file here. So right here we set up our application and then pass requests to the necessary place. Next we have the resources folder. The resources folder contains a folder called view. So all of the views that you create for your application are going to be stored inside of the resources views folder. So right now we have home.twig and then home.blade, just examples to show that you can actually use either of these two templating engine. Okay, so this is an example of a file created using the Twig templating engine, and then this is created using Blade templating engine. So we have a folder here called layout. You can see here that we have base.html.twig. So this is the base layout for Twig template, which you can actually modify to suit your specific project need. So as a matter of fact, all of the things here you can actually modify to suit your own project need. And then this is the base layout for Blade. And then lastly, inside of views folder, we have errors. And inside of errors, we have the 404 page. So by default, the framework provides you a 404 page. So let's just see that on the browser. Let's try to access a route that doesn't exist. This will take us to the default 404 page, which you can actually customize to suit your specific need. And then next we have the routes folder. Inside of the routes folder, we have just one file, which is routes.php. This is where you are going to define all your application routes. By default, it will come with two routes. One is for the home page, and then the second one is just to show you how to use a route closure. We're going to be talking more about this later. Then we have the test folder, where you should define all of your unit tests. So if you want to write test cases for your application, you define them inside of the test folder, and that will conform to whatever is being configured inside of the php unit.sml file. So I'm going to quickly open my command line too, so I can just illustrate to you. So let's come inside the project folder. I'll right click and then open git batch here. So I'm going to type vendor bin PHP unit. So this is how to trigger the PHP unit test, and you can see that our test is actually failing. It is looking for this specific test, but it cannot find it in the body. Okay, so let's get back to that specific test case and see why it is failing. So let's just come here, and I think the reason why this is failing is the link that we have here, the URL that we have here, goes to local.legato.com, but we are using local.blog.com. So we change that, and then let's trigger the PHP unit test again. And this time we get green. So this is how easy it is for you to actually write PHP unit tests and then trigger them using the command line tool. Legato provide this support out of the box. You have command to create a unit test and then easily trigger the unit test. So we'll talk more about this later, but right now let's look at vendors directory, and then we are looking for Legato folder. So this is the call of the Legato framework. So all of the call files for the framework are stored inside of the SRC folder. So you can take your time to read through the code to understand how the framework thinks and does things. So we have the console folder, we have the controllers folder, database, we have functions, we have mail, models, and then routing, security, sessions, templates, validation, views, and some other files here. So if you have some time, try to read the code. It is well documented and easy to actually understand. And then we have the .env file. This is where we are going to be storing all of our environment variables. And then lastly, we have the Legato file here. This is the file that actually enables us to run the console command. So remember, when we wanted to start a local PHP server, we type PHP Legato, and then we actually type the name of the command that we want to run. So that is the actual file that we are typing at here. Legato is the name of the file. We are saying we want to run this file. It's an executable file, so we can just run this command with list to see all of the available commands that Legato actually provide. You can see that this is a version 1, and right now we have some set of commands here. List, start, add command to create a console command, add controller, add model, add unit test, and then we have these other commands here, which we are still going to talk about command later, but basically these are the default commands that are available when you are using Legato v1 as at the time of this recording.